Happy Wednesday, everybody. We're on here a little bit later than normal, but it is GC Live. Kendall Smith here, joined alongside Jack Veltri. We hope that you're all having a great day so far. We are excited to be here and talk some South Carolina football. It's the bye week, so a chance for everybody to reset a little bit here and take a breather. No South Carolina game this weekend, but lots of other football to watch. Jack, you just got back from Oklahoma. You're going to have a little break here this weekend with the vacation. So let's check in with you. How are you?
I'm doing good, Kendall. I'm glad it's the bye week. I'm glad there's two this year because in years past, obviously it's just one and it's like probably around this time of year. And then it's like you have so much football going on. But it's nice to have a little bit of a break again after the first bye week. And yeah, I'm going to Disney this weekend. So that'll be a lot of fun. I know you were just there. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I was just talking to Wes about this actually and how close I feel like the bye weeks are this year. I feel like we just had a bye week, and I know it's a little bit weird because we're getting used to kind of, dealing with the 2 bye weeks and all of that. But yeah, I think that it's a little bit close together for my liking, I think. So what about
Definitely
you?
a little bit. It's a little close, but I just don't know how else you would really spread it out, to be honest, because I mean, 2 bye weeks, what are you going to put one in the middle of November? I don't know if that makes much sense. So I guess doing it now is all right, but hey, it's fine with me having two.
Hey, we're working through it. It's going to be a blast to see South Carolina back on the field next weekend at home against Texas A&M. Wes and I, shameless plug, just put out a recruiting rundown about 10 minutes ago where we talk a lot about that Texas A&M game and the high stakes that it brings in terms of recruiting. Obviously, South Carolina looking for a big win there as well. But before we go any further and talk more about football and more about the Gamecocks, let's give a shout out to our presenting sponsor of GC Live, Jack.
Yeah, so right above us here, Clint Hammond. If you are looking to take the next steps to potentially purchase a home, maybe you're living in an apartment right now, or you're just trying to buy a home, but you don't know where to begin, go ahead and give our guy Clint a call. He has been in the mortgage industry for a very long time. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he's a supporter of all of our Gamecock Central live shows, stories, just about anything to do with Gamecock Central. So you're going to the right guy in that case. So give Clint a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to clinthammond.com. So once again, I want to give a big shout out to Clint Hammond for sponsoring all of our GC Live programs.
Yes, we love Clint, and we are super thankful for his support. As always, we say it every week, but he truly is the best of the best. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's get into talking about all things South Carolina. You just got back from Oklahoma, Jack. How was it?
It's different. All right. So have you been to Texas A&M before?
No, I never did the Texas A&M trip when I was at South Carolina and traveling with Colin and Michael Sauls. We never did that trip all together. I was a little bummed we didn't get the chance to, but I've heard a lot of great things about going to Texas A&M, so I kind of wish I was able to.
So A&M's a good time, but I was going to say it's kind of, for anyone that's been to A&M, it's kind of like that, honestly, just in terms of, it feels bigger, right? There's not a lot of trees everywhere. You got some windmills and wind turbines, I guess, and it's a different cat. But honestly, like small town feel, it was a good time. Obviously, South Carolina got the win. I gotta say, I know a lot of people probably want to know: is it an SEC environment? Does it live up to these other schools? Because obviously, Oklahoma just joined the conference this year. I have to say, I haven't been to all the SEC schools yet, but I would say this one definitely lives up to the hype. A lot of friendly people there. The atmosphere is definitely a pretty cool one with tailgating and stuff. But it was a good time for sure, and I'm glad South Carolina finally got the win they were looking for.
Yeah, it was a big win for South Carolina, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But as a whole, and when you look at this past weekend before we start talking about the bye week and all that South Carolina needs to work on and what's coming up with Texas A&M, let's just go back to this weekend. Let's talk about the positives a little bit. What was different with South Carolina in your eyes, Jack, that you felt like really helped kind of get them over the edge for this win? I mean, obviously, dominance on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, well, I think you got to start with the literal start they got off to in this game, jumping out to a 21-0 lead within the first, I think, 6 minutes of the game. By like the 9-minute mark, left in the first quarter. South Carolina is already up 21-0, and you're just mind blown. Like, what is going on here? And I think the Oklahoma crowd was probably stunned too. And look, again, you brought up the defense. That's how South Carolina won this game. You get the interception on the first play of the game by Nicky Minwari that leads to Rocket Sanders scoring a touchdown 5 plays later on offense. And then after that, Demetrius Knight forces a fumble, and Tonka Hemingway picks it up, and he goes ahead and scores. And then on the next Oklahoma drive, Eamon gets right back in on the action, has a pick 6 this time around. So the defense was pretty much, for the most part, lights out in this game. The offense, on the other hand, I think you would like to see a bit more out of this group. But it's just, I think it's probably part of the fact that you're facing a really good defense in Oklahoma, and it is what it is. But defensively, 9 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, the 4 turnovers, 6 forced fumbles. I can go on and on. They played a heck of a game, probably their best outing of the season. And I know it's Oklahoma's offense, but hey, you play who's on the schedule, and I thought they did a really good job from a defensive standpoint on Saturday.
It's the 9 sacks. That statistic is what really stands out from this game, and it's been talked about a ton. Just unbelievable work from South Carolina's defense against Oklahoma. It was so refreshing and so satisfying to watch, and I'm sure a lot of Gamecock fans feel the same exact way, but I actually posted it on my X. Nick Eamon is a star. He was fantastic in that game, and, I knew he was going to be that way, not to brag or anything, but from the second that I met him when he was in high school at Irmo High School, I was working for Gamecock Central, had just started, got assigned to go see Nick on his signing day. It was in December of 2021, I believe. I'm doing the quick math in my head. And he's great. He had probably the most famous line of anybody I have ever interviewed in my time with GC. I remember I asked him, what is your message for South Carolina fans? And he said, Clemson is on the clock. Lo and behold, the next year, South Carolina beats Clemson at Clemson 31-30. That's a game nobody will forget anytime soon. So Nick Eamon, he's great. And obviously I have a soft spot for him anyways, because I have covered him since he was in high school. But to see him have that kind of game, and it's really not a shock because he's had a lot of other great moments as a Gamecock, but that was really, really awesome to be able to see that. So how was watching it in person, Jack?
It was, and look, Nick had a fantastic game. 11 tackles, the 1 T for L, the 2 picks. He was unbelievable in this game, but it was just crazy being up in the press box, and you just see, like I said before, 6 minutes into the game, it's 21-0. And honestly, I think a lot of people, Kendall, were thinking this is going to be like a low-scoring game.
Yeah.
In my head, I kind of thought, like, okay, to win this game, you probably need to get to about 21 points, and that's on either side. But the fact they got to 21 points within 6 minutes, it's like, yeah, this game's a wrap. Like, there's no coming back from this with how putrid Oklahoma's offense was in this game. And like we said, the 9 sacks, it was the offensive line for Oklahoma is really, really not good. But again, Oklahoma, they're in a weird spot right now where we just aren't used to them being kind of like worse than South Carolina. It's kind of just funny to say out loud, but honestly, like it was a good time. And we got a question here from Steven. Did I catch a glimpse of Barry Switzer? Unfortunately, I did not with all the legends there. I saw his statue, if that counts. But other than that, it was a really good time. And the Gamecock fans, they showed up. Like a lot of fans on the flight to and from Charlotte, which was really cool to see, especially a lot of fans on the flight back from Oklahoma on Sunday night, which was really cool. And they showed up and showed out, and props to them because this is definitely one of those trips where it's like, hey, first time ever playing Oklahoma, why not go?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome that they were able to make the trip. And obviously this game meant a lot for quite a few reasons. A must win. We don't really love to use that term here at Gamecock Central, but we'll say it was pretty much a must win for South Carolina. You knew you kind of had to walk out of the month of October in that really difficult schedule with at least one win, and South Carolina came close against Alabama. Obviously the Ole Miss game didn't go the way that they wanted it to. So it was pretty crucial that they were able to beat Oklahoma. And you have to bring up the fact that Shane Beamer has all of his ties with Oklahoma, so that added an extra layer to the situation as well. Jack, you said we're not used to Oklahoma being worse than South Carolina. We need to think of it glass half full. South Carolina better than Oklahoma.
That's true. That is a much better way to look at it, to be honest. Just look, Oklahoma, this was a game that I think they really needed to have from an Oklahoma standpoint. And you look at the rest of the schedule. I mean, they get Missouri, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Maine. Maine might be their only win left on the schedule. So for South Carolina to go in and win by as much as they did, it kind of felt like the Kentucky game a little bit earlier this year, where it's like, I think people still thought South Carolina was going to win both these games, but the fashion in which they just went in here and dominated. I mean, they led from start to finish. Just a really good performance, especially from the defense. Offense, a lot of work to do, and as RL says here, the road to 6 wins feels a lot more clear, because think about Wofford, that's a win probably, right? And then all you need is one more win. And I mean, honestly, they probably should exceed that, no problem, especially with how well your defense is playing. So we're going to see what happens. But again, this is a really, really good point in the season where it's like, it's nice to see South Carolina playing some great football right now.
Yeah, and I think something that, you can take away from this game, and it probably felt really great for South Carolina fans, was the dominance, because just eking out a win, while that's obviously satisfying and entertaining to watch, I feel like sometimes it's just like, all right, like, let's dominate this game. Like, I don't want to be stressed. I don't want my hands to get clammy. I don't want to be shaken. I don't want to be pacing around my living room freaking out because this game is so close. Like, this was one where, at least for me personally, I felt like from the jump when South Carolina was up by 21, I'm like, all right, the shoulders can relax down a little bit. Like, this is fun. Like, we're having a good time. We're not super stressed. And those kind of games are really exciting to watch, and something I think fans have been longing for a little while. So for South Carolina to be able to do that, certainly huge. And we're going to talk all about the bye week here on this episode. By no means are we going to talk about the Oklahoma game the entire time, but definitely wanted to catch up with Jack about it, considering he was there, considering it was such a big win for South Carolina. But now you're back to it. You're back to work. You're getting ready to finish this season. You're sitting at 4 wins, and you're looking at the road to becoming bowl eligible. But not just 6 wins for South Carolina. Obviously, they want more than that. And the better you can do, the better bowl game you can get into. So they're going to work on some things here in the bye week. We'll talk about that. But I want to talk about the clearest path, Jack, you see for South Carolina going forward. You just talked about it. Wofford should be a win for South Carolina, hopefully, given that all things go right. You never want to say 100%. Obviously, that's why you play the game. But you're looking at a win against Wofford. Who else do you think South Carolina's got a pretty good chance at?
Let's see. I'm trying to think here. So you got A&M. That's at night. I know A&M's playing well, but just something I feel like has to give at some point. I think we're going to learn a lot about the Aggies this weekend when they play LSU. And if they win that game, it's like, okay, they're kind of for real here. But I think South Carolina the rest of the way. A&M, I think, is a toss-up. That Missouri game in mid-November at home, also a toss-up. I know Missouri hasn't been playing exactly good football this year, but it's still Missouri, and it's also like that's South Carolina's kryptonite, essentially, where they just haven't been able to win, since we were both in like high school. So it's been a while from that standpoint. Vanderbilt, I mean, they're playing much better this year, but something just like beating Ball State only by 10 points just tells me like, okay, like this is still Vanderbilt to some extent, and South Carolina's defense can definitely pull away, maybe have a win there. And then Clemson to end the year, you never know what can happen. So I think in reality, you're looking at something between 7-5 to 8-4, probably 6-6 is definitely on the table. But I just think 2 wins the rest of the year, that would mean you're probably losing to Clemson, and then 2 other games on that slate to either Missouri, A&M, or Vanderbilt. I think South Carolina probably wins 3 of those last 3. I'm sorry, 2 of those last 3.
People like to hear that. You heard it here, Jack Veltri.
Yeah, 3 of 3. Hey, that'd be crazy. Then we're talking about 8-3 going into Clemson. I don't know. Let's not get playoff hopes into this at all. But I will say, probably they probably end up winning 2 of those final 3 SEC games. So 2 of Vanderbilt, A&M, Missouri. I think they probably lose 1 along the way, but I think they can win 2. Wofford, that should be a win. And then Clemson, I said it on my season predictions, which have been all right so far. I think they beat Clemson. I just don't buy into what the Tigers are doing. Like, they haven't really played anyone outside of Georgia. We don't really know what this team is fully made of. And with the way this defense plays, I really think they can make that Tiger offense just kind of non-existent. And then by that point in the year, you kind of hope South Carolina has some sort of identity from an offensive standpoint. Because honestly, like, the fact that they didn't turn the ball over is great and all, but they didn't really do much in that game against Oklahoma offensively. And you could say, yeah, they were being conservative and stuff. But at the same time, it's like the offense really just hasn't found its rhythm completely. So by that point, you kind of hope they do. And if so, I really like South Carolina's chances the rest of the way outside of just that Clemson game.
I think the thing that we have learned from this college football season, and not just from South Carolina, but from watching it all together, is that anybody can really beat anybody. And Wes and I were talking about this on the recruiting rundown as well. It has nothing to do with recruiting. I just went off on a tangent, started talking about it. This has been such a fascinating college football season, and I've really, really enjoyed watching it from the start to where we are right now. I feel like every week there are games with super high stakes, and it's been really interesting to watch. So really anybody can beat anybody, and we know South Carolina's schedule is certainly not easy. That's been a talking point since we got this schedule a long, long time ago. So it's something we'll continue to talk about, obviously, as we get into the rest of the season. But now South Carolina has their second bye week, and they have a chance to kind of hit refresh, hit pause, take a minute, and improve. After their last bye week, South Carolina did not see the improvement that they were wanting at all. It wasn't a good thing. It's like they had the bye week, they come out, and people are like, what did you do? Like, we're seeing nothing. If anything, it got worse. So we talked about this last time South Carolina had a bye week. But Jack, what is it that you want to see South Carolina work on in this bye week so they can come out next week at home against Texas A&M and they can come out running?
It's got to be the offense, right? Because the last bye week, if I'm remembering correctly, the offense was non-existent in that game. I think the thing with the offense is, and this was going back to the Ole Miss game, they got across the 50 multiple times, but they couldn't finish drives. And that's why you see them only come out with 3 points. I think this time around, you got to figure out ways to, you started finding ways against Alabama and Oklahoma to finish drives and get into the end zone. But can you do that against A&M, who's going to be a much better team than what South Carolina has faced lately with Oklahoma? And I'll argue that A&M is better than Alabama right now. Like, I think that's just the fact of the matter. This is going to be a really tough task, but I think having the 2 weeks to prepare for this team, and maybe A&M's coming off a loss. Who knows what happens on Saturday? It very well could be the case. But I think from an offensive standpoint, you got to figure out, what works best for Lenore Sellers? What kind of plays do you need to run with him? Do you kind of narrow it down a little bit to where it's like, instead of the entire playbook and making things really difficult, why not use these 10, 15 plays that work so well for him and just use it right out of the gate? And if you need to change and make something else happen, then do it. But I think if you're Dow Loggins, if you're Shane Beamer, if you're Lenore Sellers, whoever's in that meeting, Mike Shula, figure out what works best for Sellers and go from there. Obviously, running the football as South Carolina is key. They haven't been able to do it great lately, but I think if you're able to start running the ball a little more effectively with the Rocket Sanders, I think it makes everything a lot easier on Sellers. And you like the protection to be better in the passing game. It hasn't so far. I don't think it will be anytime soon. So you kind of just have to live with it, I think, at this point. But if you're South Carolina, I think it starts with figuring out what Sellers, what works best for him. And I think they probably know that by now.
So I love some of the questions that we're getting right now, and I certainly want to get to them as we go throughout the show. Of course, we have this question here is the biggest question on the O-line, Thompson, because he's young and inexperienced at a pivotal position on offense. What do you think, Jack?
So, this question is in reference to tackle Josiah Thompson. And, I think with him, I haven't been super impressed. And I think it's when you look at him on tape, he's getting beat on a lot of blocks and he's not holding on for super long. And he just looks kind of outmatched, whoever you really put him out against. Specifically against Bama was kind of rough. And I think at both tackle spots with him and Henry, it's been really, really bad this year. But I'm going to have to say, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say it's because he's young and inexperienced. At the same time, though, we saw Trobaugh and Tree Babalade kind of hold their own last year. probably going against tougher competition in the SEC last year when you had to go to Georgia and stuff, and you get thrown into that type of environment and do fine. So I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering here, but I think with Thompson, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and just say it's kind of young and inexperienced because, again, he is playing a pivotal position like Big Red says.
I want to talk about this one as well. This is what I kept seeing all of last week. South Carolina is the best unranked team in the country. It was all over social media. I know you saw it too, Jack. I'm sure a lot of people watching right now saw it too. Before we get into this question, do you agree with that? Do you think South Carolina, and let us know, weigh in the comments as well, everybody, is the best unranked college football team in the country right now?
Without a doubt. I think it's pretty plain and obvious. Like, again, if it's not for mistakes that you made on your own, so self-inflicted mistakes, you're probably looking at being 6-1 right now. We're not even having this conversation. We're probably talking about, is South Carolina a top 10 team, let alone a college football playoff team? That's the harsh reality of losing games in the SEC, is that you're this close to being in a different conversation right now. But instead, we're talking about, are they the best team outside the top 25? Absolutely. Their defense is championship level. Offense, glimpses. They show glimpses here and there, but they play really well. And for being a 4-3 team, they're right there, I think. And I think they're going to be fine the rest of the season. And that's why I'm so high on them, probably going 8-4 or better, honestly.
So do you think they'll get into the top 25 at some point this year? I guess that all depends on what other teams do, right? So South Carolina can do all that they can from the standpoint of what they can control, but they can't control all the other games.
So I would say, if history serves correctly, eventually 3-loss teams will start getting included in the college football playoff rankings and the AP poll and stuff. Right now, if South Carolina were to go out and just beat A&M, I think they get a lot more votes. I don't think they get into the top 25 just yet. But once you beat A&M, and then it's like you go on the road, beat Vanderbilt, who, mind you, right now could be the case still when South Carolina travels to Nashville, they're ranked. So I think after a few games here, you start seeing South Carolina get a little bit more respect, get ranked, because I think they only got one vote in the AP poll this week. And the college football playoff rankings will be completely different with criteria and stuff. But I think for South Carolina, I think there's a pretty good chance they get ranked here within the next few weeks. I'd be a little surprised if it's after A&M, but I think it depends on the way they win that game. If they just blow the doors off the Aggies, then yeah, rank them. But for right now, probably after Vanderbilt.
Did you say when South Carolina beats?
Yeah, when they're a good team. The only thing holding them back is themselves, right? The way they've lost these games, they beat themselves. Like Alabama, if you don't fumble as much as you did, you probably win that game. LSU, okay, you can kind of say it's a little bit more in the refs' hands. At the same time, you had a 17-0 lead and you didn't do anything with it. So South Carolina just beats itself at times, and I think the rest of the way, just play like you did against Oklahoma with a little more offense, and I think you really are going to be that type of dominant ranked team that teams just don't want to play week in, week out.
Before we get into this next question, you just talked about the rankings for the college football playoff. I want to know your thoughts. I know that this isn't Gamecock related exactly, but I mean, it's timely. It's a topic that a lot of people are discussing right now. So I'm curious really quickly before we keep going, and I promise we got a lot more South Carolina to talk about, but what do you think, Jack?
Well,
are you looking up right now?
Yeah, hold on. Do the rankings come out?
I just want to know what you think.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, did the rankings come out?
I mean,
did I miss something?
Last night I was watching a full show on ESPN. They're talking about it. So I just
gosh. Well, okay. Well, I apologize. I must have completely missed that then last night. But anyway, look, I don't know who's ranked where.
Jack's like, I
don't know, man. You caught me off guard.
Locked in on the grind of South Carolina.
This is my bye week too, guys. You know, this isn't just the team.
I think Indiana deserves a little bit more respect. I'll just go out and say it.
Yeah, they do.
I'm biased because my parents went to Indiana, and I'm so excited for them because they get to go to Bloomington this weekend. College game day is going to be there. Yeah, they are so excited. They've had this trip planned for a while, and then we find out College game day is going. So I'm excited for them. I know Bloomington, Indiana, basketball school. That's what most people think, but I'm really, really impressed with what they're doing there. So that's my one comment on the situation.
Let
I
me
know
just
some people
say,
will say Indiana hasn't played really anybody that's been too tough,
come on.
but I'm really pleased with where Indiana is at right now. Anyways,
Indiana is very, very good this season. And I think the only thing, not to get too far off topic here, if I'm remembering their schedule correctly, I know they play Ohio State. I'm pretty sure at the Horseshoe eventually this season. But like honestly, like Washington, you should win that game. You go to Michigan State, you should probably win that game too, even though Sparty's playing a little better now. Michigan, you should probably be at home. Ohio State's gonna be the toughest test on the road. You probably lose that game, and then Purdue at home. I don't know. That might be a toss-up because you never know with Purdue. The point is, Indiana, are we talking about college football playoff bound? Like
I mean, I don't know if
two
they will be.
losses?
They're obviously in the mix, but
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. It's never a surefire thing. The one thing I knew growing up as an Indiana supporter, because obviously my parents, everything was all about Indiana all the time. I feel like the Indiana fans have similar like problems as South Carolina fans, where you like feel like things are going great, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, nope,
Yeah.
we're back. We've been humbled. We thought it was going great. It wasn't. Anyways, we'll see how the season goes. But yes, very happy for my parents and their experience this weekend with College Game Day. Anyways, back to South Carolina. That Texas A&M game, I mean, realistically, you think that South Carolina has a great chance to win that game at this point in time, Jack?
They definitely should have a chance. And look, I know A&M's good and all, and if they win this weekend against LSU, makes things that much tougher because then we're talking about A&M probably coming in here as a top 10 team in the country. However, this defense so far, until proven otherwise, this defense can go up against anyone out there. Like that pass rush is one of the best in the country. And I'm glad they're starting to get a little bit more respect. And then offensively, look, I don't know. They're going to have to figure it out, but they have 2 weeks to prepare. So I would imagine the offense comes out playing a little bit better. But also, this is a night game. We know how South Carolina is under the lights, and look, A&M they're gonna have to play their best game. So if they do play their best game, then they probably win this game. But I think if there's any slip ups or South Carolina's just getting what they want in this game, I feel like the Gamecocks can win. There's just a lot. There's a lot of momentum here for South Carolina after a big win, and you have 2 weeks to prepare for it. I would be genuinely shocked if this team looked any bit like it did after the bye week going into Ole Miss. If they look like that again, there are bigger problems here with South Carolina. I just refuse to believe that the same thing can happen twice where South Carolina just doesn't look prepared at all for another game after a bye week.
Well, I won't be there, so maybe that will help the situation because, of course, the one game I show up to this year, South Carolina doesn't score a touchdown. If they don't score a touchdown under the lights at Williams-Brice next weekend after the bye week,
They got problems then. They got problems we can't cure.
And, I think that's the big thing, right? Like we talk about the defense. We talk about how great the defense looked against Oklahoma last week. And we talk about the offense and, the flashes that you see where the offense can be really good. And then you have moments of frustration with the offense. What do you think is key for South Carolina in terms of feeling confident? And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but feeling confident going up against Texas A&M, because I feel like that's the thing. Like you obviously have a very young quarterback in Lenora Sellers, still figuring it out a little bit here and there. But, what do you think needs to happen for South Carolina to be at their highest level of confidence from an offensive standpoint next weekend?
Well, I think it starts with Rocket Sanders being able to run the ball a little bit more effectively, right? I feel like when you look at Rocket this year, he's been fine. But when you go back to 2 years ago and we see just how dominant he was, and yes, I know it was prior to all these injuries and stuff, man, was he good. It was like he ran for like 100-something yards every single game, and I feel like we haven't seen that to the full extent this year. Have we seen him play pretty good this year? Sure. But I don't think we've seen that full steam ahead, no one stopping Rocket the rest of the year type of moment. And I feel like we need to see that at some point this year, just to deem the Rocket Sanders experiment coming to South Carolina a success. He's been good, but you want great. And I think that's what's missing here is Look at South Carolina's offense. When he's running the ball well, they tend to play a lot better. Go back to that LSU game. When he was running the football effectively, South Carolina put up 33 points in that game. That is really good, and that is probably what you'll need to beat a Texas A&M team that, look, they're going to be good defensively, but I just feel like Rocket, with how big and physical he is, I know the offensive line needs to block better. A lot of things need to go right here. But I think Rocket being Rocket, running the ball how he wants to and moving up and down the field, being hard to tackle, hard to bring down, it just makes this offense so much more dynamic, and you don't have to put a lot on the shoulders of Sellers because, look, he's been playing a lot better lately. But at the same time, Rocket's kind of been a little hit or miss. So get Rocket going, and that makes everything a lot easier on Lenoris and the rest of this offense.
So since we have next week on GC Live to talk all about Texas A&M and this game, I want to also look forward a little bit more this season too. But before we get into that, we have another sponsor that we would like to shout out here on the show, Jack.
Yeah, let's talk about our good friends over at Prize Picks. So Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And then, of course, you'll watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. I've used Prize Picks a ton in the past. Use it for MLB, NBA literally just started yesterday. World Series is going on as well. A lot of different opportunities to get involved in the game. You got college football, NFL tomorrow night. A lot of different things going on where you can get involved. And it's not just the main sports. So, sorry, my dogs are going nuts right now in the background. Wow. Anyway, just go to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and use the code GC on screen, which stands for Gamecock Central, to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. So we want to thank PrizePicks for being a wonderful sponsor of our Gamecock Central Live programs.
Well, now you have to tell us about your dogs.
Oh, Lord.
What are their names?
Where do I begin? Well, if anyone follows me on Twitter, you've probably seen my dogs about 100 times by now. One dog, Basset Hound, Lucy.
Aww.
She is about 4, I think, 4.5. The other one, Lexi, a brown bloodhound, and she's about going to be turning 2 next month. So, yep, those are my dogs. I'm guessing one of them's been gone all day. The other one's been laying around home. So I'm guessing, judging by all the noise outside my door here, it probably got a little crazy. So.
Jack is actually doing this GC Live after a dentist appointment. He is
That's
like back
right.
at home.
I know, I am.
Because you went to Rock Hill to go to your dentist appointment, right?
That's right. Yeah. Oh man, my teeth just feel.
Any cavities?
No cavities. You know, the gums, they could be better, but no cavities. So cheers to that. But yeah, it's nice to be home, but it's also like there's so much going on right now, and with baseball, basketball, it just never stops. So
best time of the year, October. We've talked about it. I had my first cavity filled like 2 months ago. I was really upset. I made it 24 years without a cavity.
Congratulations.
No, I was so mad. Like when they told me I had it, I'm like, are you kidding me? I made it 24 years without a cavity, and here I am. Anyways, we'll continue with football. Weekly check-in on the Yankees, though. How you feeling? Also, I want to hear from everyone who's winning the World Series.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good question to ask.
Yankees, Dodgers, what do we got?
Oh, man, I'm feeling great. Seeing the Yankees. So I was in Oklahoma over the weekend when they won games 4 and 5. And then 5, I was at a bar with CJ, our photographer over at Gamecock Central. And just seeing them win. It's not the most ideal place. Like, I'd rather be at home watching this, to be honest. But look, they won. I don't really remember 09 that much, to be honest. But this is really cool, and I'm really excited. My worst fear, though, and I'm really hoping this is not the case. Like, obviously, everyone loves Game 7. Game 7 also happens to take place on the same day as the Texas A&M game. I am going to be a very unhappy camper if this series goes 7 games, and God forbid the Yankees win Game 7, and I have to watch in the press box. Watching baseball with me around this time of year is a different experience. So. If they end up winning that and I have to be sitting in the press box, I'm going to be, I don't know. It's not, I don't even want to think about it, but hopefully they win this series in 5-6 games. We'll see what happens, but I don't know. I'm happy. That's the important part.
Well, Jack, I wish your Yankees very good luck. I'm excited to watch this World Series. I have to
Me
say, I'm
too.
probably pulling for the Yankees if I had to say a team that I am rooting for. So I'm looking forward to it. I think baseball is better when the Yankees are good. And that's just as a whole across the board. Same with the Dodgers. I mean, I think when those two teams are good, the interest levels are really high. And I think that's great for the sport. And obviously, as somebody who works in the sport full time, I love to see that. So, yeah, I'm very excited
Yeah.
about this World Series. We're getting some different answers there from who you guys think is going to ultimately win. But let's just hope for Jack's sake it doesn't go
My
to Game
sanity. I
7
need it.
because South Carolina, of course, it's a night game too. It's not a noon game. It's a
Oh,
night game. So that
gosh.
would be a major conflict for you.
I'm
With
gonna have to tell. I'm gonna have to tell Shu. Look, Shu. I'm gonna have to back out of covering this game, man. Or you're gonna have to give me some grace period here.
I don't
Like,
know if he would like that too much. I
oh
don't know. He's
gosh,
great.
man.
He's great. He's super chill. But yeah,
Yeah.
South Carolina's got Texas A&M next weekend, and then looking forward, we talked about teams that you think South Carolina has a legit chance to beat, and a team that we've actually heard about a lot from you guys that are watching is Vanderbilt. And I think people are a little bit concerned because they're like, okay, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. We know this is not a typical Alabama team, obviously. But I do think that there are some concerns of like, okay, it's not the typical Vandy either. This is not Vandy that's bottom of the SEC, terrible. Everyone can expect to beat Vandy. This is like, okay, we're taking this a little bit more seriously this year. So are you worried at all about this one, Jack?
A little bit because Vanderbilt has played a lot better this year. And the question from Big Red: do they think Vandy is better than us because they beat Bama? Vandy is technically better than South Carolina right now because they beat Alabama, but also because their record's better. Look, Vanderbilt is a much better football team this year. I don't think they get enough credit for how much better they look. I mean, look at the odds on ESPN right now. South Carolina only has a 60% chance to win. And I say only, like that's a bad thing. Usually in these games, South Carolina hasn't lost in this game since I believe '08. So it's been a while, and normally it's like, oh, they
Oh
have
my
like a
gosh, do not jinx it,
I,
Jack.
I'm not. I just said they
Never
haven't.
say that again. Thank you.
All right, all right, all right.
Never
But,
again.
yeah, listen, it's been a while. So anyway, Vanderbilt. It all starts with Diego Pavia, Peso Pavia, absolutely electric player to watch. If you haven't watched him, go ahead and do it. He's a great player, but they also have great players all around him. And look, I will say it's caught me completely off guard that this team has actually like played well. Like they have a legit chance to go to a bowl game here relatively soon. They probably just need to win. I mean, they got to win another SEC game. They should be able to do it at some point against Auburn, probably. And you hope that's the case because if Vanderbilt is looking to get a bowl win and it has to, or go to a bowl game, and it happens to come against South Carolina, like if that's the game where like they have to win, you better hope South Carolina steps up to the task. Look, it's at home for them. It's going to be a little tough, but I do think South Carolina should be able to win this game on the backs of their defense. And I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But I don't. My point is, don't underestimate this team because they can definitely catch a napping.
Yeah, 100%. We've seen that this year. Have you been to Vandy Stadium?
I have not. I've been in Nashville a few times now, but never been to Vanderbilt, the university, the stadium, none of it.
I was there 2 years ago with GC, and South Carolina ended up becoming bowl eligible after winning that game. It was a night game. It was daylight savings, so we got an extra hour after the fact to go out in Nashville. It was a very good
Uh-oh.
time. I remember that vividly. So yeah, it was super, super fun. And you wouldn't think that Vanderbilt's atmosphere would be anything that would bother South Carolina. And obviously, Vanderbilt Stadium is not anything compared to what you're experiencing at Georgia, Tennessee, name any other SEC school. It's not the same. And that's just because it's smaller. And, historically, the fans haven't shown out as much because the team hasn't been as good. But this year, now that the team's better, and especially if there's a chance to go to a bowl game on the line, you don't know what kind of atmosphere can
No,
be down there
you
or up
really
there
don't know.
in
It's
Nashville.
it's gonna be it's gonna be interesting to say the least. Like, and Michael brings up a good point. Maybe
Hey,
Shoe, if you're listening,
Nashville.
let's get Kendall on
Just
the
let
Bucks
me
to
know.
go. Like, oh man, but like seriously, like just don't take this team, for granted, I guess you should say, or don't overlook them because they're gonna be ready to play. And Clark Lee has done. The record may not indicate it, but he's done a really good job this year with that team. And again, they got depleted, gutted in the portal, but somehow they're making it work. And I haven't watched a ton of them this year. And yeah, they've lost to Georgia State and Missouri and stuff. And yeah, they have only beaten Ball State by 10 points. But guess what? They're playing good football right now, and they're 5-2. So that's the only thing that really matters is the record at the end of the day. So for South Carolina, they definitely have to be on their A game. They should be on their A game anytime they play, but especially against this Vanderbilt Commodores team.
All right, so it's Texas A&M, and then it is on the road at Vanderbilt, and then South Carolina's got Missouri. I just honestly want to skip past Missouri.
Me too. Just find a way
to say at this point. Like, I feel like every time South Carolina plays Missouri, it is just ultimate frustration. So hard to watch, and hopefully they can turn the page on that this year. We've hoped that for a long, long time, though. I mean, you said it. They're basically the kryptonite for South Carolina. And these games are so hard to watch. And I feel like South Carolina always comes out against Missouri, and it's just like molasses, like nothing's going. Like it's hard. And so I don't even want to get into it for that purpose.
Would you believe it if I told you right now on ESPN, South Carolina is favored 54%?
I wouldn't be like, I mean, obviously I believe you, but I'm not shocked by that necessarily. Like, I don't think South Carolina is the worst team. I don't think South Carolina has been the worst team in years past, like majority of the time in playing Missouri. They just can't beat Missouri. Like South Carolina will come into that game. Like remember a couple seasons ago when South Carolina beat Tennessee, they beat Clemson, they play Missouri that season. And they lose. And everybody was expecting for South Carolina to come out and win that game. So I feel like you just can't have expectations when South Carolina plays Missouri.
You certainly cannot. And I think it's been since 2018. So look, something's got to give at some point. Like
this is the year.
Maybe this is just the year. Maybe this is just the year where streaks just get broken and stuff. And that's not a good thing, I guess, in some senses of South Carolina's schedule. But at the same time, at some point they got to beat Missouri. And I feel like this has got to be the year just because, I mean, look, Missouri's 6-1, but that is a very fraudulent 6-1. You went into double overtime with, okay, at the time, Vanderbilt wasn't very good, but nevertheless, you went into double overtime with Vanderbilt. You lost to A&M blowout fashion. I mean, I don't know what to make of this team. But if anything, this would be the time where it's like, oh, Missouri's going to get right against South Carolina. So you hope that's not the case this year.
Well, speaking of breaking streaks, and I keep referring back to 2 years ago, but really, like the glory days for me, senior year of college for us, and it was just the best when South Carolina beat Tennessee and then went on to beat Clemson. The next weekend, like chef's kiss, the best possible scenario to end off that season. Obviously, the Gator Bowl didn't go the way that fans wanted it to, but we'll talk about that another time. Or we won't, because I don't really want to talk about it ever again. But the streak that was broken was Clemson's home win streak. South Carolina broke that a couple seasons ago. Their 31-30 win over the Tigers this year back at Clemson. So we know what happened the last time South Carolina played in Death Valley. And I think the big question is, do you think South Carolina has the chance to compete with Clemson? We brushed over it. Clemson started off the year, and in my opinion, I'm like, oh, no. Like, this is not the Clemson program that we're used to. And we've kind of seen that decline over the last couple of seasons. But now they're starting to kind of get back on pace, and they're ranked. And, we're seeing a Clemson program that seems to be doing better. Jack, you're giving me a face. Like,
who have they played? I hate making.
I'm not sitting here and saying that they're great. I'm just saying
they're beating who they play. This is like, okay, you want to talk about like fraudulent? I talk about Missouri. I just don't buy into Clemson, and I'm sure I'll be wrong on that. But it's just
if South Carolina loses to Clemson a Clemson fan is going to cut that clip of you
Oh, I
saying
know.
that and put it in some sort of
Whatever.
video and
Look,
just use it.
look at their schedule. App State, NC State's horrible now, by the way. Stanford's not good. Florida State is a dumpster fire. Wake Forest is, oh my God, they're so bad. And Virginia, all right, you beat Virginia. Like, okay, cool. I mean, Louisville. This is gonna be the real test, I guess, on their schedule is back-to-back weeks. You go to Virginia Tech, playing. I'm assuming that game will be at night. That should be a really tough game. And then you play Pitt is ranked. Wow, at Pitt that should be tough too. And then Citadel, and then South Carolina. So there's not really like another big tough test on the schedule for Clemson. But what I will say is like if South Carolina's defense plays the way it has been all year, I really do like their chances. Like Cade Klubnik has been fine this year. He's been pretty good. But when he faced Georgia's defense, and we know Georgia, they got a good defense. So does South Carolina. Clemson looked awful in that game. And I know that's the first game of the year. But something just tells me South Carolina is due for a win this year in that stadium. And I know it's going to be tough. It always is, especially if it's at night. But I really like their chances, especially if the defense continues to play the way they have been.
Yeah, that's the one everybody always circles on their calendar, and rightfully so. A huge rivalry matchup that I cannot wait for. And I think it's gotten so much more interesting over the last few years because, the last 3 years, this year, last year, and the year before, you really feel like South Carolina has a good chance to win. And it wasn't necessarily the case for a few years there, especially in the Muschamp era, tough towards the end. So yeah, it's an exciting one for South Carolina fans. The last game for South Carolina in the regular season, maybe a chance to spoil something for Clemson. We'll have to see. What do you think about this one, this comment here?
Didn't he get a contract extension the last time they beat Clemson? How many contract extensions can we give this guy? Like, okay, look, I think Beamer catches a lot of flack because, he's a little, maybe people think he's a little corny, whatever. But the point is he's doing a great job this season. And I think recruiting wise, this, Kendall, and everyone, I think Wes, you guys have talked about it a ton. They're doing a great job on the recruiting trail. But in terms of results on the field, it's been a little hit or miss. But I feel like this season, the way this team, and there are no moral victories, but the way this team is able to just respond after a awful loss to Ole Miss and then nearly go beat Alabama, and then that's a gut-wrenching loss right there. You go out there and beat the brakes off of Oklahoma like you're supposed to. It just says a lot about this team, and that goes back to Beamer. And he's doing a pretty good job coaching. I'll say the one time I haven't been on board with him so far this season was the coaching decisions against Ole Miss. But outside of that, he's done a good job. And so, look, if they beat Clemson, I don't know should beating Clemson get you a contract extension? I don't know. I think just having a great year, like if you're 8-4, 9-3 after the season, yeah, contract extension for sure. But I don't know if the Clemson game specifically, like if you were 0-11 and then you beat Clemson, would you be handing out a contract extension? I don't know. I don't know if I would, but look, I know how much.
That's
I know
a very severe representation.
I know. Like that probably tugs into like the Lou Holtz heartstrings of a lot of people, but still, I think if South Carolina beats Clemson, it's a huge deal. But South Carolina needs to have a good season in general to get a contract extension. You can't be going 2-10, 1-11. But I think right now they're having a great year, and we'll see. I think they're going to end it on a good note, and I do think they will beat Clemson at the end of the year.
So on the note of Shane Beamer, and then we'll get to this question. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. But on the note of Shane Beamer, and I think a lot of people know this, like I'm a huge Shane Beamer fan. And this is just more from a personal standpoint of just how kind he was to me when I was a student at South Carolina. He didn't have to be that way. And I think a lot of times you do see it where coaches maybe aren't so friendly to the younger faces in the room or the student media or whatever it might be. And he was always incredible. And when I talk to recruits and when you talk to guys that play for the team, like they love Shane Beamer. And that's obvious. South Carolina is building an incredible 2026 recruiting class right now. We did a video about it last week for the recruiting rundown, Wes Mitchell and I. We just talked about it in our recruiting rundown that came out today. Like the way he's able to recruit, and I just think the way that this program rallies around him and kind of what he's brought. Like I think that this is just my opinion, but you see on Twitter, you see all the time people kind of coming for him if South Carolina loses or something goes wrong. And I don't think that's particularly fair all the time. I know that he's an SEC coach. I know that he bears the responsibility of whether or not this team is successful or not. But I do get a little tired of seeing every time something goes wrong, people saying fire Shane Beamer. I just don't think we're in the position right now, under, where he's at and what South Carolina's done and, kind of where things are going. I don't think that that's really, where you should be at this point in time. That's my opinion. And I'm not saying everything has gone 100% right. And I'm not saying there's not reasons to be frustrated, but I am getting a little tired of seeing it every time there's an inconvenience or something goes wrong on social media.
You're so right about that, Kendall. It's so inconvenient. Like, it's so just, I don't even know the best way to put it. I'm not going to say the best way to put it, but I think it is just laughable anytime something goes wrong and it's like, oh, fire Loggins, fire Beamer. Like, what is that going to do? That's only going to make things worse. Would it not? That puts a lot more, the season's not going to magically just go from whatever it is at that point in the year when you fire the guy to it goes all sunshine and rainbows. That's not how it works. Things probably get worse before they get better. So look, with Beamer, I know not everything is peaches right now. Like, okay, like South Carolina's 4-3, maybe they should be 6-1, and you went 5-7 last year after an 8-4 year. Like, there's a lot of ups and downs, but that is how coaching tenures go. It is not going to be like Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, all these big time guys. South Carolina, let's reality check here. And maybe people will not like this. South Carolina is not Alabama. South Carolina is not Georgia. They're an SEC school, but they're not top flight in terms of, you know what I mean? Like winning tradition. Like South Carolina only has so many 10-win seasons in program history, So they have to they're not like all these other schools that can get, 5-star recruits right and left. Like, yeah, they can get great recruits, but it takes more work and effort. The name alone doesn't get the 5-star recruits, but you got to work for it. I think for South Carolina, he like Beamer's doing a really solid job, in my opinion. Like, I just think, last year, like Big Red says, last year was kind of just train wrecked by depth and stuff. So we'll see what happens. But again, like, I think to just automatically just jump to conclusions that firing Beamer is going to solve everything, like whenever anything goes wrong. But then next week, like, after this week, when you beat Oklahoma, it was like, oh my God, Beamer's the best. Beamer's this, Beamer ball. Like, huh? You literally just 2 weeks ago were probably like, yeah, fire this guy, fire that guy. And I still see all the comments, like this one right here, like fired Al Loggins. Like, I see it every week, and I see it even when South Carolina is doing well offensively. South Carolina can score 100 points, and then it's like, Loggins isn't doing a good job. Like, get real. Like, come on. Like, let's hold the brakes a little bit on all this firing talk.
Jack just popped off, everybody.
It's the same thing with Clayton White. I'm glad this was also brought up. How many people, like, y'all can comment if you want to or not, or don't show face on it. But I'm sure most people here were probably like, yeah, fire Clayton White after October last year. And then what happened? He's had a great year. And it's like, we're talking about him maybe being a head coach somewhere else, contract extension, doing a great job. Like, again, Clayton has done a great job in his tenure. It's just injuries kind of ruined a lot of last year for South Carolina. And it's the harsh reality. So not to go on a complete tangent like I have, but it's just, not calling for someone's job. What's that going to do, honestly? Like you said, Kendall.
Yeah, I think, the message, at least from our standpoint right here, is we're at the bye week, the last one of the season, just a chance to kind of reset, is just to take a step back for a minute. And, I know it's hard, and it's so hard on game days, and especially when things aren't going South Carolina's way, the frustration creeps in. And I completely understand that. You and I have been around the program for a long time now, Jack, and have been watching for a long time. I'm from North Carolina, 5 minutes from the South Carolina border. You're from South Carolina. So we, have seen it. We went to school at South Carolina. Obviously we have not been around the program and watched as long as some of you, because some of you have, watched them for longer than we've been alive in our early 20s. But I think the message is like, the frustration can creep in, but kind of take a step back. I just don't think that the fire beamer statements are, I think it's ridiculous.
It just does it just does nothing good. It does not do any good. And honestly, it just becomes so toxic, and it just gets really old real quick hearing the same thing over and over again. Like, I think back to baseball season. Okay, it was kind of justified. Like, Mark Kingston getting fired, it just made sense. Like, they weren't getting, South Carolina baseball was not getting the job done. The point is, it's day after day. It's the fire this guy, fire that. Like, at some point, you kind of just have to accept, and this is a good comment here. I'm glad you brought this up. Look, some schools are able to turn it around real quick. Like, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but I can't. But, like, Indiana, perfect example, actually. Indiana, this, Kendall, notoriously not good at football. This year, they're having a great year with their new coach. And everyone's probably thinking, like, oh, why can't this team do that? Why can't they do that? Like, every place is different, and it's not so easy as, oh, because they did it, we can do it. It's not always the case. Every place is different. Recruiting regions are different. Recruiting in the Northeast is probably a lot different, or Midwest, I should say. It's probably a lot different from recruiting in the South, where everyone is kind of a good program going after the same guys and stuff. So, look, I don't know. It's a whole wormhole.
And I think with Indiana, in that specific case, obviously Kurt came from James Madison.
Yeah,
that was a good program, and he brought a lot of guys over with him and coaching staff with him. That's a good program. I know people look at JMU and they're like, it's not, the type of school you typically think about when you think about football powerhouses and the best of the best, but he's bringing guys over there as well. So there's a lot of factors that play into it. But I think when you look at it, obviously last year was tough for South Carolina, and you had Spencer Rattler back, and you really thought, okay, like, this is South Carolina's year. People were predicting 9-10 wins for South Carolina last season because you wanted to see that growth. But I think, growth isn't always linear, and that's sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow, but growth is not always linear. And we are in a world of instant gratification, want it now. And I understand, like, I completely understand, but Shane Beamer comes in 6 wins for South Carolina. Next year, you beat Tennessee, you beat Clemson, you beat Texas A&M for the first time. You go to the Gator Bowl, you lose, but you still felt like that was a successful season. You find out you're getting Spencer Rattler back. Last year was a massive disappointment. I'm not going to say it wasn't. I'm not going to sit here and, tell people, oh, you shouldn't have been upset about the way last season went. Obviously, everybody was, because I think people expected a lot more, but injuries, just a lot of things played into it last year. Growth is not necessarily a linear process. I do think as a whole, under Shane Beamer, South Carolina has experienced a lot of growth. And that's where I'm going to leave it.
Absolutely.
And I'm always going to back Shane Beamer. I'm sorry. I am. He was so amazing when I was there. And so I'm always going to have his back.
And I can agree. Shane is phenomenal, like a phenomenal guy, always very kind to the media and stuff, and calls people by name and stuff, like remembers people's names. And again, like Kendall said, I can't say enough good things about the guy. And look, he came into, I think people forget, he came into an absolute dumpster fire of a program. Like, South Carolina was 2-10 under Will Muschamp. That was like 2020 was a horrible year for South Carolina. And so, look, it's different if, like, okay, South Carolina went like 5-7 in Muschamp's last year, and you come into that. Like, that's a different story. But you came into an absolute mess. And so, look, it takes time to recruit. It takes time to build something. And I know people are going to say, oh, turn around the program in a few minutes. But it's not the snap of your fingers, and it happens overnight. It takes time. And so, look, if by year 5, it's like if South Carolina finishes, like, let's say 7-5, 8-4 this year, they take a step back and they're 5-7 next year, okay, I'm with you. Like, it's not going anywhere. But if you finish where you think you should finish this year, and then you take that next step forward, it's like that gratification starts feeling a lot better now, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And, that's something that I talk to my boyfriend about all the time. He's an Ohio State fan, and they're frustrated right now. And they're always talking about, what the future looks like, and Ryan Day and all these things. So all I have to say is it's not a problem that only South Carolina experiences. Other schools and the top level schools are facing it as well, with not necessarily meeting expectations or people being frustrated about certain things. But I think we got to ride it out, see how the rest of the season goes. All we know now is that South Carolina is coming into this Texas A&M game with some huge momentum after beating Oklahoma, a massive win for the Gamecocks. They're doing really good things in the recruiting world. It's about the recruiting wins, but it's also about the wins on the field as well. You want to get bowl eligible if you're South Carolina. And I think, it's not just about the 6 wins. I think a lot of people want to see 7 wins. They want to see 8 wins. Of course they do. But, you're getting into better bowl games at that point. I know we've talked about that on the show as well, Jack. So just for fun, before we get out of here, and let us know what you guys think too. South Carolina makes a bowl game. I know I asked you a few weeks ago. I said, where would you want to go? But what do you realistically think the bowl game could be at this point in time? Just kind of tallying up where you think South Carolina will pick up some wins and, potentially take some losses over the next few weeks.
Well, realistically, and I hate saying this. I've never been to this bowl game. I don't think I've ever covered it. Well, I covered the Mayo Bowl once, but that's a different story. Birmingham Bowl. Oh, can you imagine how horrible that would be? Like, I've heard the nightmares about the Papa John's Bowl and I know people on this thread will know about it, but like, that would probably, like, if you get to 6 wins, that's probably where you're at. I think though 8-4, 7-5. Send them to like Florida or Vegas.
Jack is like wanting Florida.
But you know what? If I'm picking a bowl game, I think South Carolina's going to go to by the end of the year. I think they're going to go to like I think it's called like the ReliaQuest Bowl now, which is the
Tampa
Outback Bowl. It's just it's been a while since they've been there. Actually, now that we really think about it, it's been since like 2017, 2018. So I think it just makes sense to potentially go there. Maybe. Isn't there a game out in Nashville? Music City Bowl.
Yeah.
They haven't been there. So, look, I think one of these would be really cool. And I know the people are not.
Nashville would be fun, but they already play in Nashville this year.
So I know, but and I think that's probably part of why they just haven't been sent to the Music City Bowl. It just seems like for whatever reason, they just never end up going. But you know what? I think one of those Florida games would be cool. Like, not because of my love for going to Florida and stuff, but just it's the better bowl games in my opinion.
Not the Gator Bowl again.
Yeah, no.
I went to that bowl game.
No, I've heard that's not honestly, Jacksonville's kind of a dump, to be honest. So the Independence Bowl. Oh God, who could forget? But the Mayo Bowl. I'd be cool with them going.
I am a 5-minute walk away from Bank of America Stadium.
Oh my God.
Right now, as we speak. That was a fun time for South Carolina.
Oh, it was a good time. Yeah.
Carrion Joyner, massive game.
Oh,
that was huge for him. We'll go down in history for South Carolina. But yeah, that would be fun. I do think South Carolina, and obviously living in Charlotte, it's not as exciting for me. I feel like they're in Charlotte a lot. They
are. You know what's funny? And I don't know if this is probably disgusting, but I don't know if you do as well. I still have my mayo jars from the.
Oh, I have my mayo jar.
I haven't even opened it.
Literally on my desk. Yeah, so, I didn't open it.
They're definitely fully expired by now.
Yeah, I have my mayo jar 100% when they gave the customized mayo jars from the South Carolina Duke's Mayo Bowl a couple years ago. Yeah.
But they've been to Charlotte a lot lately. And I think they would probably avoid sending them there. That's why I think more in line of, all right, I don't know what it's going to take to get to the Citrus Bowl this year. Normally, from just past, I know that'd be cool. But it's from past experience, that's typically the highest ranked SEC team that's not in one of the New Year's Six games. That's like the consolation prize to not making the New Year's Six for an SEC team. Will they get there? I don't know. The playoff makes everything a lot more difficult now to where it's I don't know what happens from that standpoint. Do you get I don't know how it would work, but I'm with David on this. Let's go somewhere new. No Jacksonville, no Charlotte.
Looking at the Charlotte skyline right now. What are you talking about, guys? It's a great city. No, I totally understand. I love Charlotte, but they've been here a lot.
Charlotte's awesome, and it'd be convenient for a lot of people. Just don't send them to Birmingham, please. Bowl people out there, Birmingham Bowl representatives, please, for the love of God, don't send us to Birmingham. Send this team somewhere.
What about the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee? Isn't that where that one is?
It is. Yeah. I know SEC usually ends up going there. That's a long. I'm about to look up how long of a drive it is, but that's a haul to get out there.
Well, I think that Tampa would be amazing if they
Mhm.
made it to the old Outback Bowl, Rally Quest Bowl. That would be a blast, and you have to go to a Tampa Bay Lightning game if
Mhm.
they do play at
Lightning, PTSD from my Islanders losing games, losing back-to-back years to these guys in conference championship games. But no, look, I think Tampa would be cool. Orlando would obviously be awesome. I mean, shoot, Vegas would be cool. But like, I don't know. Where do you
Jack
think?
Veltri in Vegas.
Oh God, I don't even know. That would be. I don't know. I don't gamble, but like that. But like sports, yeah, But where do you think they should go, Kendall?
Well, I would love to see them in Florida as well because I think that's achievable for a lot of people to go to. I know Gamecock fans will show up and show out no matter where South Carolina plays, but I think that is achievable. And at that time of the year, that's looking a little bit better because obviously you're getting some warmer weather down in the Sunshine State. So I would like to see them either play in the old Outback Bowl, the Rally Quest Bowl, or play in Orlando. Obviously,
Let's
because
do
I
it.
love to go to Disney World. So
Heck
that
yeah.
would be a blast too. Not the Gator Bowl though. I would rather not be.
Not the Gators.
And I don't think they will because South Carolina's last bowl game obviously was the Gator Bowl. So I don't think that will even be in the cards for South Carolina. Could be wrong, but yeah.
We'll see. Maybe the playoff. How about the playoff, guys?
This has been the craziest college football season ever, so I'm not gonna rule anything out at this point.
Oh man.
I don't know. Who's going to win the national championship? Okay, that's our last question. And then, we are rogue this week, everybody. It's the bye week. We're totally going rogue.
We've been off the rails this week.
We have a crazy scene right now in college football land. Who do you think?
So national championship, is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's hard because obviously you've been expanded.
I'm about to look at the top 25 because I honestly seriously I have not been able to watch a ton of college football, even though that's my job. But
because you're watching South Carolina, that's how I was when I was covering the team as well. All you could worry about and you were consumed with was South Carolina on game day. So that's why bye weeks are really nice because you can actually dial in. Now that I do not work in football, except for obviously talking about it here on Gamecock Central, I do get to watch all of the games, which is awesome.
Aren't you so lucky? But here's the thing, Kendall. I'm looking at the top 10. None of these teams, every team has flaws right now. Honestly, it's just not there's not one standout. And so I'm going to go I'm not going to go with the traditional Georgia, Oregon pick. I think it's going to be something different. I think we're going to get a year with chaos as if it hasn't been chaotic enough. And we just get some craziness going into the playoff. I'm going to say, I don't even know, honestly. I think Oregon's going to make the national championship. Until proven otherwise, I think Oregon's probably the best team in the country right now. The other team, I think, getting into the national championship this year, oh gosh, I'm looking at you know what? Just for fun, let's go with Indiana. I think Indiana
makes the national championship. I do not know what my family will do, specifically my parents.
It'd be crazy. You know what though? Go off script. Honestly, this would be the most South Carolina thing to just run the table and get in and just do some crazy stuff. This defense, never count them out with this defense is my final take on it. I don't know, but what's your national championship pick?
Well, I thought it was going to be Ohio State, and I still feel good about Ohio State. I think that is a good team. I know they lost to Oregon. Obviously, it came down to the wire, but I was always riding with Ohio State. I hate to admit that because I don't want my boyfriend to ever hear me say that. But that's who I was riding with. I think Oregon's obviously the easy pick in this situation. I see a lot of people saying Georgia. That's hard. I think it's hard. I think Georgia's a good team, but they lost to Alabama.
They have flaws. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think every team has a flaw this year. I don't think there's one outright team where you're yep, that's the absolute dominant team.
No, definitely. And just to make it clear, I don't avoid questions at all. If you know me, I answer all of the questions for the most part. Look, Shane Beamer, my final thoughts on this whole extension talk, because it's so off topic like everything else that has been today. Look, I don't even know what his contract is off the top of my head right now, but I think if you finish 8-4, we're talking extension. For sure, step in the right direction. Shane's got this team going in a good spot. And so, look, we'll see what happens. But I think for right now, South Carolina, maybe not playoff bound, but like good bound. Can we like
Good
uh,
bound.
good bound? Can we like get on that kind of train? Because I think that is a real big step in the right direction. Texas getting in. How do we feel about Texas? Because like I feel like they were the last domino to fall in the SEC in terms of like, okay, like if Texas beats Georgia, they're the legit team in this conference. Yeah, in the SEC.
Well, I thought it'd be Texas or Ohio State at the beginning of the year. And then the last 2 weeks, it's just like my
been weird.
ideas have gone down the toilet.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was hard to watch Texas last week, and I was surprised. But it was tough to watch.
It was. You know what I'm rooting for this weekend? I am rooting so hard for, and this was brought up in the comments, seeing a service academy get into the playoff.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if I think it's what Navy plays Notre Dame this week at MetLife. If Navy ends up winning that game, again, the schedule is pretty clear. Both service academies play Navy, or I'm sorry, Notre Dame at some point this year. Navy this week, Army in a few weeks. If they manage to just win that game, both those schools against Notre Dame, who is down with 2 weeks in a row of America's game? I'm here for it. And then, and then get into the playoff, like the good old days. I don't know. So
that's awesome. Yeah, huge hats off to both of those programs. And I love to watch them succeed. It is really, really great, and just so appreciative of everything that they do for us. So yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of finish off this show there. Yes. We really appreciate all of you watching as well. We definitely went off the rails a little bit in this episode, but hey, it's the bye week, so anything can happen. And don't you worry, because next week we will be back. South Carolina will be taking on Texas A&M. And I promise we won't talk too much about other teams, the college football playoff, the World Series, hockey, bowl games, our favorite places to go, Las Vegas. The list goes on and on and on. We'll try to keep it a little bit more focused next week, but we had some fun with you guys here today, and we went even a little bit long too. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you guys have a great rest of the day. This has been GC Live for Jack Veltri. I'm Kendall Smith. We'll see you guys soon.